So now that we have this up and we're looking at the word "and," I know that you talked in one of your lectures about that there's a forgery of I think it's a bifolio or a leaf in what is it,
It's
University of Chicago?
two
Two
leads
leaves.
from Chicago, and it's a very interesting document. It came out during the Mark Hoffman period of forgeries in the early 1980s, but the church bought it for a considerable amount of money. I do not know the exact amount, so I'm not going to speculate, but they paid enough to keep you and I going for a while. And they believed it was legitimate because there were these provenance statements that went with the document suggesting that it had somehow got into the library in 1920s, but there was no actual donation information, who gave it or anything. So the historians like it. It's totally bogus because it is full of errors. That I won't call them errors. Let's say unique properties that I have never seen before. It's in Oliver Cowdery's hand. So I got the photographs of it and I had it at home. My wife, who had worked with me on the printer's manuscript in Independence and was really familiar with what it should look like, she looked at that document and said, "Oh, that's a forgery."
Wow.
Just looking at it.
Even your wife could tell.
Oh.
But you're saying it looked like Oliver Cowdery's handwriting.
Well,
one of the scribes.
it's intended to look like it, but it overall didn't quite look right, and she completely rejected it because she had worked on every leaf of the printer's manuscript and seen so many pages of Oliver Cowdery's writing. So I said, "Oh no, it's from the University of Chicago. It's okay." And I started transcribing. I got to the second line and I said, "Uh-oh," because A and D had been written out.
Instead of the ampersand.
Instead of the ampersand.
Oh, okay.
Found two more of them in the whole document.
That's amazing.
This part of the original manuscript, the printer's manuscript, is actually in the hand of Martin Harris, and he mixes his A and Ds with ampersands, and this forgery also mixes the ands with the ampersands. It isn't Oliver Cowdery, and so I went over. I identified all the unique spellings. When you get all these unique properties, you say, it's better that we not accept this until someone can really explain these unique properties as being Oliver's. And the Joseph Smith papers came up with this brilliant thought. Oh, well, he's just starting out as a scribe in Alma 3-5, and he's making all these kinds of errors. But of course, that isn't a theory at all, because it could be used to explain any kind of thing you might find in this document. It's a non-provable kind of hypothesis.
So are there some scholars today who claim that this is authentic?
Well, yeah, the Joseph Smith papers.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Let me tell you, if you get the big book out of the printers of the original manuscript published by we had this debate, and I said it's a forgery, and I'm not going to accept it. I don't want this in the legitimate fragments because it'll contaminate everything. And they said, no, the provenance statements. So I said, look, if you want me to be an editor of this thing, and you can't use certain photographs of the original manuscript unless I am. So you're going to have to agree that I will write up my own section against the two leaves, and you will write your own section against the two. And they said, oh, we've never done this before. We've always had the editors come to some kind of agreement. I said, well, we're not going to have that here. We're going to bring the argument out to the readers and let them see it. So they did theirs, and I did mine. The review board thought it was brilliant that we actually allowed. The church doesn't really like disagreement.
Well, let me go back to a second to the leaves from University of Chicago. So has anybody done a test on the ink to see if it's the same ink that Oliver Cowdery used in other places?
Well, not they test the ink for its time period and various things like that, and the paper too, and it matches the time period. But Mark Hoffman, the forger, was well known to go into libraries and cut out end sheets from books that dated from the 1830s and so forth. So he would always pass the paper test because what he did the forgeries on. To get the ink right in his forgeries, he was caught by this. He was heating the inks and it would oxidize and thus get an older time period. But the problem was that when he heated it, he did it too fast and caused the ink to crack.
Okay.
Because forgeries had cracked ink, which is not a characteristic of documents. It's faded, oxidized ink, not cracked ink.
So what about the University of Chicago pages? Do they have cracked ink?
No, they're it passes some of those aspects. Wow. But if you read my analysis, there's all these misspellings, all these it's a bad text. Almost everywhere else, the original manuscript is better than the printer's manuscript. It's a better text, except for the Alma 3 through 5 from the University of Chicago. It is a terrible text. It's got all kinds of bizarre reading.
Oh, tell us about the unique name of the movement that's based on the University of Chicago, right? Instead of Mormon, it has something else.
Oh yeah, well, this is every Hoffman. I'm saying it's Hoffman. I believe it is. Every Hoffman document has a reason, and the reason for this one, besides just causing trouble, was it's not the earliest, but it's the second and third occurrence in the text. The earliest we have of Mormon. It is spelled Morman.
Okay.
It's done in heavier ink flow. It's going along and it's fine. And then he takes his quill and he doesn't overwrite it. He just writes it with heavier ink. More man. He wants us to see this. And if we followed it, we would have to say we've discovered from the original manuscript that the real name of our nickname is Morman,
So do you think he was doing that to cause, and Mark Hoffman was this forger who actually killed people, didn't he? I mean, he was
ultimately, to prevent people from revealing that he was a forger.
So was he doing this to make it more valuable, do you think, or really just to cause trouble? Or
both. If you're saying this is a document that's got the original spelling of Mormon, that will help. But I think a lot of it was pernicious behavior.
For example,
I can tell you an example.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's an 1830 Book of Mormon at the University of Utah. And I went and opened it up, and here's this beautiful handwriting, Joseph Smith Jr., Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, written in it. Okay. And I look at the description of this when it was given, and so there's no notion that there was a Joseph, that he had written this in this book, that it was even his book. And then I looked at who had looked at this 1830 recently, and there was Mark Hoffman's name on the list. So the guy just goes in, and he's going to cause real trouble by just signing Joseph Smith's name. He can sign his name. He knows how to do it, and he signed his name. And I don't think Joseph ever got a Book of Mormon down in Susquehanna anyway. It's
yeah, but in that case, my guess, and I don't know that much about the Mark Hoffman forgeries, but my guess is he had some other forgery, and he wanted someone to go compare it with, a document that's in a respected library and say, oh, it is the same handwriting.
He did do that quite a bit. He an independent handwriting of Martin Harris for the Salamander letters. So he wrote a letter to somebody else with a poem of his, and it was in this handwriting. So then that was used. Oh, well, if you can check this handwriting because it's in this letter he wrote. Well, that was a forgery itself. So.
By the way, we have an example like this in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So and you talked about how he would take paper from the 1830s, right?
Yeah,
blank paper. Mark Hoffman, you're saying, did that. So a lot of the Dead Sea Scroll forgeries they're tiny little pieces that
Oh
came from the
yeah.
margins at the top and bottom of real Dead Sea Scrolls, and
Oh
those might be worth a few $1,000s a blank piece of leather. But if you add ink to it, now all of a sudden it's worth a fortune. And one of them that is believed by many scholars to be a forgery is in California, I want to say. And there's a place in the book of Deuteronomy where it mentions Mount Ebal, and in this fake Dead Sea Scroll, instead of Aval, it has Grizim, which is what's in the Samaritan version, right? Now, if you
yeah,
had just written
yes.
Aval, yeah, that'd be worth a lot of money. But to say one of the original Dead Sea Scrolls has this textual variant, now all of a sudden
Yeah.
it's worth a fortune. So you're saying that's
Yeah.
what the Mormon thing is, that or I'm wondering if that's why he did it, to make it worth more.
Well, the thing is, the church knew about it and they just ignored it.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting question. So what is the approach of the and I guess the official name is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints
Yeah.
in Salt Lake City. What is their approach to what you're doing, to your critical text project?
Well, I would say most of them are just ignoring it, just and stifling it. They do not cite the Yale edition. They do not refer to any
Oh,
text.
tell us what the Yale edition is, because we haven't talked about that yet.
Okay, well, the Yale edition is, I published the first edition in 2009. I published a second one, 2022. It is the text of the original text of the Book of Mormon as I've been able to construct it. We don't call it the original text because you really can't be sure of that, even though we textual critics love to say, I have got the original text. So I called it the earliest text because it was based on the earliest sources. And at the back, it has an appendix of about 700 and some of the important variants in the history of the text. It isn't a list comparing my edition versus the church's edition. In fact, in many cases, we agree, but it's just what are important variants in the history of the text. So the Yale edition does one. It's got all the bad grammar, which people have complained about, and Joseph Smith tried to remove.